we have a situation now that German towns are being stripped and taken away so they can access the coal, whereas we're not allowed to burn turf here. We seem to be the sacrificial lamb. So of course then on security, we're jeopardising our food security, we're jeopardising our own energy, we're giving away the rights of that to somebody else.
I believe there's a large offshore wind farm that's currently being developed in the west coast of Ireland, and a lot of fishermen are saying that they are concerned about it because they think it will be interfering with the spawning areas of many valuable fish. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and what you've heard as far as farmers' concerns.
Yeah, so we're not just concerned, we're actually working with the Seafood RER group, Offshore Renewable Energy. So we work with under Captain Robert McCabe, and we've been working with him for the last year. Now, two years too late. So I've spoken at different conferences about the wind energy and where it goes. So I started looking into the practicalities of it, and I'll just give you a couple of statistics. So offshore wind, right, is a floating platform, and that needs to be anchored to the seabed. So one link of chain, just one link, is 1 meter in length, and the weight required for one link is 2 tons of metal, right? So I'm pausing so people can understand this. So if you're in a depth of 400 meters and the chain is interlinked, you probably need 800 links, right, to reach the seafloor. That's 1,600 tons of metal for one chain on one wind farm. So here's what I have questioned and spoken to Eamon Ryan about this, and we met him in Kerry. The actual cost of this and the materials that'll be used. Now, you often hear about, whether it's expendable and will you get a return for your money when you invest in something. So we put together the figures, and I'd say it'll be probably 50 years before, without any subsidies, before the price of electricity would pay for some of these wind farms. So if that's not going to happen, you're either going to pay for it through your taxation, or the people ashore will pay for it in the cost of electricity, which will shoot up. So when they say that this is going to be cheaper and renewable, okay, I'd like to see the facts and the figures around that. I've asked the questions, we haven't seen it. What I do know is that most blades from the wind farms are being put into landfill and buried. So I couldn't see that as being good for the planet or being renewable. I think it's thousands of tons, again, this is only hearsay, I don't know, that you'd need for an actual platform to drill into the ground. You will need tens of thousands of cables running along the seafloor. So of course it's going to have an impact on marine life. If they're saying a fishing boat dragging a trawl across the seafloor is destroying the ocean floor, what will this do? And just to put that in context, a fishing boat steams or travels when it's fishing at 3 knots, 3 kilometers per hour. It has a net out the back of it, 300 meters wide. So for that boat, at the fleet of the Irish fleet, at a conference I was speaking to, it would take 100 years for our fleet to trawl every inch of the 880,000 square kilometres of water. Yet we see that these new entrants into the marine industry are being lauded as being fantastic for us, and they're going to be seen everywhere. And there was a presentation at the North West Waters Advisory Council in coupling with the Pelagic Advisory Council that I sit upon, and one of the presenters, independent of us but working for the industry, said to reach the aspirations of our government in wind farm power offshore, you would create a 12-kilometre wide corridor from our port, Castlelumbear, to Newfoundland. 12 kilometres wide. That's what you're talking about. So the emperor has no clothes is what I would spring to mind. And I think that people have to start putting facts and figures forward. And we don't have any infrastructure in the country to take this massive power when it comes ashore. So it's not just about putting wind farms to shore. You have all the complexities of that. But of course, anything going into the ocean, if you stand a stick into a river and look at it, you'll see how that interferes with the flow of the river. You'll see currents coming behind it. So of course these structures outside in the water have impacts. And we also have scientific studies that show if there's a massive amount of these in the one area, the blades distort the wind direction and flow, and it changes the temperature of the water, which has an impact on zooplankton. And zooplankton is the building blocks of all marine life in our oceans. So we have anecdotal evidence of this, And we have a Northern Fisheries Alliance created from all the countries of Europe, including Norway and Sweden. They're all together and they're all concerned about this because it's the cumulative effect of this, because each country has aspirations to put out wind farms. So they'll be everywhere, from the Baltic Sea around Sweden, Norway, around England, around us, all around the coastlines, off the French coast, the Dutch coast, the Belgian coast. Like, there is no end to this. And yet we have how much of these wind farms already on land with out-of-date technology? Why don't you start there? You know, we modernise our production and our factories. So surely we should look at the technology is there, and maybe you might have a bigger wind farm, but the footprint is already there, and you could double your output from that energy.
What do you think of the fact that I think about half or more of this particular wind development that we're talking about is going to be owned by Electricité de France, which was just recently nationalised by Macron's government in France? So a lot of people have raised objections saying that a critical piece of infrastructure that Ireland needs to function, our energy infrastructure, will be owned effectively by a foreign state. And not only that, it's a state that we compete with when it comes to things like fishing and various other industries, that we have an economic rivalry there, and suddenly they will have us, by the proverbial in this regard.
This is already evident in all the other industries. We had sugar producing industries here. It's gone. The price of a bag of sugar has tripled since. We have, imagine, soil, peat, that we can't take out of the ground here for horticulture, for growing plants and garden centres and people to enjoy in their own gardens. We have to import it from Germany. We have a situation now that German towns are being stripped and taken away so they can access the coal, whereas we're not allowed to burn turf here. We seem to be the sacrificial lamb. So of course then, on security, we're jeopardising our food security, we're jeopardising our own energy if we're giving away the rights of that to somebody else. We've seen what happened in the Mayo gas field. People mightn't realise this, but 40% of that gas that comes ashore is sold in Ireland. The other 60% has to be put onto the open market to see whether other countries will buy it rather than us. But guess what? We buy it back at inflated prices. Isn't that mad? So it's already happening to our country. We're giving away our own natural resources. We've given away our fishing. We're trying to stop them giving away our farming. And this is what's happening to Ireland. And the people that are above then are trying to tell us that this is a good thing and that we are the people that need to change, not the policies or not the politics, when we are just a small island nation cut off from Europe. We are an outermost region of Europe now. We are like the Azores. We're cut off by sand, sea and air. And any other country in Europe, or state or body, gets help for that. We don't get help. We get stripped more and more of what we have. And here's the thing, this can be stopped. We stopped it already this year over the blue whiting to Norway, a coastal state. We made sure that the government didn't give away the rights inside the 12-degree line right up to our shoreline, where people would be standing up in the cliffs of Moher and looking out and seeing Norwegian boats coming in fishing while our boats were tied to the pier walls and couldn't go out and fish, with them having 5 times more fish of that in our waters. Like, this could go on and on, Ben. We could be here for hours and hours and hours. But if things don't change in this country, what I saw in my childhood is going to happen again. You will see mass exodus from our rural communities, moving into towns and centres. And then if the jobs move away from there, you're going to have devastation. You're going to have pockets of ethnic and different people coming into areas that will not have the same opportunities economically like we've seen in the past. No jobs, and then you see crime and everything else. All the things that have happened before will start reoccurring again, but it could be avoided. We have the richest grounds. Look around you, look at the trees here. They're all living off carbon. So carbon is a food source for plants. You look up in the hills where you haven't seen them green before. They're green now, and every one of those green plants produce, through photosynthesis, oxygen for us to breathe and healthy and clean air. And yet we're told that this is a bad thing. It's been unbelievable, the misinformation that's going on out there at the moment.
What do you think of the fact that there are many products and brands that market themselves as Irish fish, but when in fact you look at the packaging, you'll see that it's Alaska pollock, for example, or that it comes from the Pacific, or and it's processed in Poland, and we've seen many examples of this. Do you think that there's something there that consumers should be made more aware of?
Yeah, look, as I said, I'm in Europe already. I'm on the Markets Advisory Council. I'm a member of that, and we're actually looking at that about food labelling and food fraud. And one of the things that I was surprised at was one of the big supermarkets, and I will name them, SuperValue, were marketing prawns, Atlantic fresh prawns, but sure, they weren't Atlantic prawns. They didn't come from our seas, you know. They're not native to this country, so how could you market them as an Irish prawn? They weren't, you know. So people have to become aware of what they're eating if they're going to support. We had, you know, Eat Irish and Irish branding and Guaranteed Irish, and we were told by Europe we couldn't do that because you'd be interfering with the open market and the common market of Europe. Well, you don't need to be told it. If you look at the products that you're eating, if you know they're not coming from here, then you know they're not Irish. So it's up to you whether you want to support your own or not, or buy it. But definitely it would be called food fraud. And we see products coming into the country and it's like they come in for a holiday and suddenly they're Irish. That's crazy, like, you know, labelling meat, beef, pork, fish. And just to give a simple statistic now that you mightn't be aware of, 80% of the fish consumed in Europe is not from Europe. It comes from out of Europe. And yet we're the ones that are told that our fleet has to shrink and is over-regulated, and they're the ones being put out of business. It is laughable of what's happening now. And the ordinary person in the street saying, well, it's not affecting me. Of course it's affecting you. Will affect you. If we don't have the resources and the way to make our own money for our economy, to pay for the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, we hear of it. You know, people, I'm leaving the country. There's not enough money here. I can't buy a house here. Why do they think that's the case? We were able to fund these from our own economic activities around our coastline, in our coastal communities, in our rural communities. That's all being eroded as we're speaking.